For the people that stick with my channel in the early days, you might have seen my requested video about the wreck of the 4005. Well, some of you might have not seen it, especially the new ones. But what you need to know here about this video is that it was just really awful. I mean, this is just a straight up copy from the Thunderbolt 1000. Not just the music and the video itself, but also straight from the script. You could say I'm a copycat in that video, but I was only 14 to 15 at that time. And you know how bad and awful we are when it comes to writings and scripting the video and just take someone else's works and call it a borrowing or inspiration. But now that I'm good with video and scripting and writings, I decided to remaster this in my own way. So without further ado, let's start. On April 27, 1953, UP Big Boy number 4005 was on a routine haul of manifest train across the open prairie of southern Wyoming. Consisted with 5 crew members. The head and crews are the engineer Leo Murray, fireman Lawrence Enders, and brakeman James R. Anderton, as well as the rear end crew, conductor James Walker and brakeman Ivan Shuragar. About 62 cars were being pulled by the Big Boy 4005, and on 9:10 a.m., they reached the Wamsutter, Wyoming, heading westbound. Since it was just a normal day, not much happened during the trip. The day was cloudy, a slight mist, and a 0.43% descending grade, so it was pretty much an easy ride. But while the 4005 is traveling, a section gang stationed at Frewen traveled 3.6 miles to the east to Red Desert on-track motorcar to obtain a supply of switch ties. Upon arriving the Red Desert, the foreman and 4 section workers were approached by a sheep herder who needed some assistance of getting the sheep across the tracks. The foreman was then called to receive the track lineup from 9:15 to 9:55 a.m., with the 4005 being the first one at 9:15. Once he received it, he assigned one section man to proceed eastward and other westward to provide flag protection at each end of the sidetrack. And when the east and westbound train passed, they were to provide protection for the sheep herder, and for the additional protection, 2 other section men were to open a switch in each main track, which led to the siding. This would display a block signal down the track at each direction, warning any unannounced train to slow down. The foreman then unlocked both switches and instructed the section men to open the switch on his hand signal. He then walked back to the sheep herder for 300 yards away from the switch to tell him of what they are going to do. But while all of this is happening, the 4005 is approaching very fast. And when the section man opened the switch and saw the 4005 coming, frantically made an unsuccessful attempt to close it before the engine passed. The engineer of 4005, Leo Murray, applied the emergency brakes, but since the engine is pulling 62 cars and going up to 50 miles per hour, it's too little, too late. With the speed that the 4005 was traveling, it would then careened off the rails and skid along its left side, tearing up rail and roadbed. The locomotive tender and first 18 cars derailed. The cab of the locomotive was destroyed as the tender tore into it, twisting and smashing the metal. The first 12 cars were badly damaged and piled up in a 70-high heap. The 13th to the 70th car were somewhat damaged from the force of impacting against each other and toppling off the rail. Scattered about the scene was the train loads, tractors, dead hogs, typewriters, sewing machine, and other merchandise. The crew of the front ends of the 4005, engineer Leo Murray and the fireman Lawrence Anders, were killed. But amazingly, the front brakeman, James Anderton, miraculously alive. And the rear end crew didn't know anything wrong until they saw the emergency signal from the engineer. And when they saw the cars piling up, they both rushed out of the caboose. Walker headed to the front train and using a dispatcher phone called what happened. He could not get near the wreck as the hissing steam billowed around the injured train. It took nearly 25 minutes for the steam to subside, while Shuragar protected the rear of the train by walking a mile back east to set the 2 torpedoes on the track so that the engineer of an oncoming train would be warned and not collide into the back of the derailed train. Brigman Anderton's left leg was twisted and pinned between a wooden seat and the steel side of the cab. He was trapped in an area of the cab no larger than 18 high and 4 feet wide for 10 hours while rescue workers removed tons of coal and cut through steel to free him. Anderton asked rescuers for a drink of water and a cigarette. A doctor was able to reach into a narrow opening and administer a dose of morphine to subside Anderton's terrible pain. Anderton later told rescuers that his hand hurt and that he was, quote, chilling a little, but could no longer feel pain in his foot. He also told to the rescuers,
"He threw it right in front of us. The switch, they threw it right in front of us. They didn't give us a chance. I felt the engine rock. I don't know how many times it rocked. Next thing I knew, I felt the steam hitting me in the face and I thought I was a goner. All I could think of was getting my hands over my face."
Unfortunately though, just 2 days after the accident, around 10:57, Anderton would later pass away from 2 to 3rd degree burns over 80% of his body. Also, early reports indicated that both the fireman and the engineer was actually alive, but this later proven to be false. As it turned out, it was just the workers talking to each other from the opposite sides of the train. Track crews worked swiftly to clear the wreckage. East and west rail traffic was delayed for 9 hours until the construction crew could install a shoe fly to route rail traffic around the accident site. Priority was to resume a normal traffic schedule. Some westbound trains were rerouted through Cheyenne on the Denver and Rio Grande. Even though many of the 4 carloads of pig were killed upon impact, according to workmen at the site, some pigs provided comic relief during the emotionally and physically draining rescue operation. Occasionally, a pig would regain consciousness and with a terrific grunt would take off running through curious bystanders. But of course, in these situations, there's no laughing matters. Now, to wrap up the incidents, here is some quotes from the fellow railwayman who knows Anders. Several days later, I was back at work on the graveyard shift, and the dispatcher told us the engine from the derailment was being brought back in and was just at the west end of the yard getting ready to come past the little dispatch office or passenger depot. We all stood outside, and in the still of darkness, not yet visible, we could hear this groaning and wrenching of metal coming very slowly down the rails being brought in behind the wrecking train. It was the big boy, and it gave you a very eerie feeling as it became visible in the old lamps of the dispatch office. Slowly it came into view, and if ever I thought I had seen a ghost, this was it. I did not know a big boy could die, but there it was, and how sad it was, just limping along like an old gray horse with one leg broken. The cab was completely gone, only the gray colors of the smoke box was visible, and some of the sidewalls were missing, and it looked as if even the frame had been broken. It just lumbered by all us, standing there with our mouth open, not believing what we were seeing. This once huge, big, beautiful thing that was once a living machine of giant steel disappeared into the darkness like it came, being dragged like a person to the grave at the east end of the yard for temporary storage. I could almost see firemen, elders waving to me as it went past. However, this is not the end of the story. We still have questions to ask. How did this accident happen? Well, what Anderton told to the rescuers were proven to be a key for the information. During the investigation, a man who reportedly threw a switch, Puerto Rican section worker Ralph Vicini, through an interpreter because he did not speak and understand much of English, said the foreman had shown him how to operate the switch, and when the foreman walked back to the ship herder, it was the foreman who left the switch in the open position, not him. But it was later determined that this could not have been the case because the open switch would have been display a signal to the oncoming 4005, providing enough time to stop safely. With not much of an evidence left, the UP and Interstate Commerce Commission officials concluded that Kenneth M. Mayfield, the foreman, and Ralph Vicini The section worker who worked with the UP for only 1 hour and 20 minutes were responsible for the accident. There were considerable variances between their stories, each blaming the other. The Interstate Commerce Commission and UP Railroad and local officials investigated the accident. A meeting closed to the public and press was held to determine how the accident occurred and who was responsible. The Sweetwater County coroner's jury found Mayfield guilty for negligence for putting an irresponsible man in control of the switch. Section worker Visney was found responsible for throwing the switch onto a sidetrack and presumably fired by the UP. As for 4005, it was sent to the UP Cheyenne facility to be rebuilt. But some sources said that during the restorations of the 4005, it was said that it was given new tenders. 4005 would then be retired in 1962 along with its siblings, and was donated to the Forney Transportation Museum in Denver, Colorado. The stories of the 4005 might have not been talked much since it was being foreshadowed by its sister 4014. But for us rail enthusiasts and the relatives of Mr. Anderton, would never forgotten the history behind this engine. Hey guys, SRT Mikado number 953 is here at the tail end of the video, and thank you so much for watching this remastered version. The original one was just awful, as I said in the beginning. And yes, if you still can't believe what I just said earlier, I did copy Thunderbolt 1000 production. You can blame me. But again, I was 15 at the time. But while on this one has some similarity with Train Boy, but I do try my best in making my own version and not like copy the other people. Oh, and back at Thunderbolt 1000, I also copied the entirety of the video through script, through the audio, and even the song. Gosh, I was such a terrible person. But nevertheless, I have changed. Also, shout out to Kelly Anderton, the grandsons of the deceased brakeman James Robert Anderton. I send you my condolences. Well, that's all that I have to say in the end of the video. I'll see you guys next time.